This was not exactly how I had anticipated this debate would begin on what is widely recognized as an historic moment in the New York State Senate, where we are going to take up and pass today the Domestic Workers' Bill of Rights, the first Domestic Workers' Bill of Rights in the United States. The women who are sitting up above us in the chamber on both sides are a small representative sample of the 200,000 domestic workers who work in our state, seeing to it that our economy continues, taking care of our children, taking care of our elderly, taking care of our homes. Their workplace is someone's home. So yes, in fact, it is a place of employment. But what they're doing is nothing new for working people in the United States. You know, the concept of workers banding together for mutual aid and protection is not a new tradition. In fact, it dates back to the medieval craft guilds, when smithies and carpenters and masons banded together in an attempt to improve their working conditions. There's a 500-year history of the fight for workers' rights in this country. And whenever they banded together for mutual aid and protection, there was always people who stood before them and against them and said, we can't afford to do this, we can't do this, we can't provide basic rights. But yet and still, workers fought against it, and they rose. They rose in places like Ludlow and Lawrence, the coal mines of West Virginia, the factories and the sweatshops of our urban centers, the shipyards of Brooklyn, the wharfs of San Francisco. They were beaten down every step of the way, beaten down by the courts and the legislatures, and still they rose. Beaten down by cops and Pinkertons, and still they rose. Industrialists and robber barons, and still they rose. And New York State assisted working people in their fight for justice in many ways long before the federal government ever acted. This state enacted the first child labor laws. This state enacted the first minimum wage law. This state enacted the first factory worker protection laws. And long after we did that, the federal government finally passed the National Labor Relations Act in 1935, when Franklin Delano Roosevelt, a former member of this body, enacted into law workplace protections for every worker in America, with the exception of two groups. One, of course, is farm workers, and the other was domestic workers. The farm workers have had some intermittent success in this country, not yet here in New York State, but they have a Farm Workers' Bill of Rights in places like California and in other states. But nowhere in America have we been able to enact a Domestic Workers' Bill of Rights. And that invisible workforce that we all take for granted, we take care of our children and our elderly and clean our houses, work every day without the basic protections that even our teenagers who work in McDonald's enjoy. And what exactly are we affording to domestic workers, the invisible workers? We're giving them a day of rest. Imagine that. You know, the city of New York last month passed a piece of legislation granting carriage horses in Central Park 2 days of rest. Are horses worth more than domestic workers? I don't think so. We're giving them paid holidays, just like every other worker in America gets. A paid holiday for New Year's and Christmas Day and Thanksgiving. And the ability to waive that holiday and be paid overtime, just like every other worker in the United States enjoys. Sick days and vacation days, just like every other worker. We're giving them protection under the human rights law. They currently have none. We're giving them protection under the workers' compensation law. They currently have none. We're giving them protection under unemployment insurance. They currently have none. And with respect to the issue that Senator Lanza raised, he's right. He and I worked on this piece of legislation and worked on the language. And I had thought that we had achieved something that he understood or was willing to support, but obviously he still has some concerns about it. And I'm going to work with him and listen to those concerns, because this bill, while it's going to pass here in the New York State Senate today, doesn't have an exact match in the Assembly. The Assembly bill is the weaker version. Senate is the ceiling, and the Assembly is the floor. But because this House has always led with respect to protecting the rights of workers, it is appropriate that we put forth the better bill. And the provision of the bill that Senator Lanza is concerned about and Senator Diaz has asked questions about relates to the notice of termination. And the legislation says clearly that an employer must provide 14 days written notice of termination. It will not apply, though. That 14-day written notice of termination does not apply, thank you, if the employer reasonably believes in good faith that the domestic worker has committed assault, neglect, or abuse at the place of business. Now, yes, that employer would bear the burden of proof if that worker brought forward a claim, but there is no obligation for you, Senator Diaz, to keep someone in your home that you feel is a danger to your child or anyone else in your home. If you want to avoid having to bear the burden of proof if they bring the claim, all you need to do is provide them the 2 weeks severance salary and tell them to leave your home at that moment. So we allowed for that. I listened, and I met with as many as members of this body as I could to address your concerns. I spent more time trying to explain what a domestic worker wasn't, as you brought me every possible permutation of what you thought they were. Senator Johnson addressed concerns about au pairs. We amended the bill to specifically state that au pairs are not covered because they are covered by federal law. I met with Senator Lanza on his issue, and I thought we had achieved language that he felt comfortable with. Obviously, I was mistaken, and we're going to continue to reach out to him. I explained to as many people as I could that domestic workers are not babysitters. They are not casual employees. They are not the woman who shows up to clean your house on Thursday and goes next door and cleans someone else's house on Friday. They are not people who work for an agency who then come to your home. They are not home health care attendees. They are the invisible workforce that we depend upon. And so today, we have an opportunity to take our place in history again, to lead the way for the rest of America and establish the first domestic workers' Bill of Rights, finally allowing the invisible women to rise. I sincerely hope all of you will look up in the chamber and you will see the faces of these women, and you will understand their plight and realize that those most basic protections that every one of us takes for granted, even our youthful workforce in McDonald's, they have none. Here is our chance to do something. Make this legislative session about eradicating 400 years of injustice, providing decency, respect, and dignity to the invisible workforce. Thank you.